Intuition, the Development and Psychology of Intuitive Senses by Celestia Copps. Read for you by Chloe Jacobson. Chapter 1. Intuition Described. Intuition is a form of knowledge that appears in consciousness without obvious deliberation. It is not magical, but rather some kind of faculty in which hunches are generated by the unconscious mind quickly sorting through past experience and cumulative knowledge. Often referred to as suspicion, intuition tends to appear holistically and rapidly, without awareness of the underlying mental processing of information. Researchers have repeatedly demonstrated how info can register on the brain without mindful awareness and positively impact decision-making and other conduct. Where intuition originates from. Psychologists believe that intuition depends on powers of pattern matching, as the mind combs experience stored in long-lasting memory for compatible situations and presents in-the-moment judgments based upon them. The automated info processing that underlies intuition can be seen in the daily phenomenon known as highway hypnosis, which takes place when a motorist takes a trip for miles without a mindful thought about the activity of driving the car. Is intuition the same as gut feelings? Intuition is usually referred to as suspicion, as they appear to develop completely formed from some deep part of us. As a matter of fact, they're the item of brain processing that instantly compares promptly perceived aspects of existing experience with past experience and knowledge, and they are provided to awareness with substantial emotional certainty. How do suspicion relate to first impressions? Intuition, like impressions, serves the brain's need to predict and prepare for what will happen next. First impressions are fast, holistic evaluations of people based on subtle affective cues and judgment of intent to help or damage. Both rely on automatic processes and, as fast assessment systems, both are subject to error, especially from biases we hold. Is intuition a sixth sense? Because human survival depends on avoiding risk, our mental apparatus is wired to be especially susceptible to signs of risk and to register them before we can recognize and act on them. That knowledge is a product of the brain's integrated negativity predisposition and can feel indistinctive. Still, it isn't always accurate, as the early caution system errs on the sides of false alarms. When to trust your gut. Our suspicions are typically right, but we tend to attach a certainty to them that they do not always benefit. They do have a tendency to be more precise in some domains of experience than others, like in the formation of first impressions. Intuition is also typically important in discovering deceptiveness and other forms of danger, and in detecting sexual preference. Should I trust my intuition? Suspicions do have their worth in complex decision-making. Studies of magnets show that even after they evaluate mounds of information, the information doesn't tell them what to do. That's where intuition is a guide. People normally cite rational-seeming requirements for their actions and don't divulge the subjective preferences of feelings that arise spontaneously. Is my intuition always right? Experts find that intuition, no matter how right it feels, is more reputable in some parts of activity than others. For instance, it can help you create new ideas or new figures of speech. But do not depend on it for understanding vocabulary, where reflective thinking better fits the task, or in judging job candidates. Many circumstances actually make use of a combination of intentional reflective consideration and automatic intuition. Are some people more instinctive than others? Intuition is a believing style, and people differ in the degree to which they rely on deliberate reflection on the one hand and automated knowledge on the other. Besides, people vary in a specific aspect of instinctive capability, namely implicit learning, or the capacity for taking in complex info without understanding, having actually discovered it. 2, some people have more experience and expertise saved in their memory database against which present perceptions can be matched. Is learning intuitive? Learning depends on memory input and retrieval. And though the mechanisms of memory run outside mindful awareness, most often deliberate effort is needed to get the information to be stored in memory. In fact, intuition isn't a great guide to tell how well you are learning something. Intuition suggests that long stretches of studying or practice are best for learning, when evidence indicates that studying in shorter pieces is more effective. Can I improve my intuition? It is possible to sharpen your powers of intuition. To some degree, intuition stems from expertise, which relies on tacit knowledge. Strengthening intuition requires making use of feedback, comparing the real-life outcomes of circumstances with the instinctual choices you made. However, being highly instinctual in one domain of experience does not guarantee reliability in each area. Chapter 2. The Psychology and Philosophy of Intuition. Intuition derives from the Latin tuere, to look at, watch over, and is related to tutor and tuition, and may also be to the Sanskrit tavas, strong, effective. Broadly speaking, an intuition is a personality to believe developed without hard proof or mindful consideration. I say personality to believe rather than belief because an instinct is typically held with less certainty or firmness than a belief, and believe rather than know because an intuition isn't justified in the normal sense and not necessarily true or precise. It isn't just that intuition is progressed without hard proof or mindful deliberation, but that hard proof and conscious consideration can actually restrain it. I'm not absent-minded, said G.K. Chesterton. It is presence of mind that makes me uninformed of everything else. Intuition is typically mixed up with instinct. Instinct is not a feeling about something, but a propensity towards a specific conduct that is natural and typical to the species. Anna stepped back, intuiting that the pet dog would follow its impulse and bite. Although impulses have the tendency to be connected with animals, people also have quite a few, even if they are, or can be, highly modified by culture, personality, and experience. Examples of human impulses include any number of phobias: territoriality, tribal commitment, and the desire to procreate and rear their young, even in the face of all the hassles, compromises, and expenses involved. These instincts are usually disguised or sublimed. For example, tribal loyalty might find an outlet in sport, and the desire to procreate may take the more rarefied form of romantic love. Aristotle claims in the Rhetoric that humans have an instinct for truth, and the Poetics that we have an instinct for rhythm and consistency. No doubt he overstated us. If intuition isn't instinct, how does it run? An instinct includes a coming together of facts, principles, experiences, thoughts, and emotions that are loosely connected, but too profuse, diverse, and peripheral for deliberate or rational processing. As this process is sub- or semi-conscious and the workings are hidden, an instinct appears to emerge out of nothing, ex nihilo, and cannot, or at least not instantly or readily, be justified. However, what makes an intuition specifically hard to support is that it is established less on evidence and arguments than on affiliation of things. It hangs delicately and invisibly like a spider's web. The emerging of an instinct, which can also take place in a dream or meditation, is normally related to a concordant feeling such as happiness or fear, or basic pride and satisfaction at the supreme cognitive and human accomplishment that an instinct represents. If this is how intuition works, then we can motivate intuition by broadening the number and variety of our experiences, and by taking down the psychological barriers such as biases, fears, and taboos that are preventing them from coalescing. We should also give ourselves more time and space free of charge association. My own instinctive faculty is sharpest when bathing, taking a trip, or daydreaming, and when I'm well rested. Finally, it would help if we actually believed in our ability to form intuitions. We have micro-intuitions all of the time about what to eat for breakfast, what to wear, what road to take, whom to speak with, what to say, how to respond, etc. I call them micro-intuitions, just because they depend on a large number of subtle variables and mainly escape mindful processing. But what about the macro-intuitions? As I argue in my new book, Hypersanity, Thinking Beyond Thinking, never in the history of humankind has the instinctive faculty been more neglected or cheapened than in our rational scientific age. Socrates is often maintained as a paradigm of reason and philosophy. Nevertheless, he rarely said any real knowledge. All he had, he said, was a daimonion or divine something, an inner guide or sense that stopped him from making grave errors such as getting associated with politics or getting away Athens after his trial and conviction. This is the voice which I seem to hear murmuring in my ears, like the sound of the flute in the ears of the mystic. In Plato's Phaedrus, Socrates presumes regarding, saying, "Insanity, provided it comes as the gift of heaven, is the channel by which we receive the best blessings. The guys of old who gave things their name saw no disgrace or reproach in insanity. Otherwise they wouldn't have connected it with the same of the noblest of arts, the art of discerning the future, and called it the manic art. So according to the evidence provided by our ancestors, insanity is a nobler thing than sober sense. Insanity originates from God, while sober sense is only human." In the Meno, which includes Meno and Preservation with Socrates, Plato checks out the nature of virtue. After Socrates has applied his dialectic method, Meno reaches the realization that he is unable to define virtue, despite the fact that he has provided many speeches on the subject. He compares Socrates to the flat torpedo fish, which typifies or numbs all the ones who come near it. And I believe that you're really sensible in not leaving Athens, for if you did in other spots as you do here, you would be cast into jail as a magician. Socrates, the paradigm of reason and philosophy, is also the extremely embodiment of a koan. Meno asks Socrates how he will try to find virtue if he does not know what it is. "And how will you inquire, Socrates, into that which you do not know? What will you put forth as the topic of inquiry? And if you find what you want, how will you ever know that this is the thing which you did not know?" In reply, Socrates says that he has spoken with certain smart guys and women who mentioned things divine, that the soul is never ceasing, has been born typically, and has seen all things on earth and below. Since the soul already knows everything, learning consists solely in recollecting that which is already understood. Socrates traces a square in the dirt and asks one of Meno's slave boys a series of questions that trigger the ignorant boy in influence to get Pythagoras' theorem. For Socrates, the boy's performance shows that there is at least something to his theory. Reason is not the only roadway to knowledge. In Nicomachean Ethics, Aristotle says that the types of personality, hexes, by which the soul can reach truth are 5 in number. 1. Clinical knowledge, which gets to necessary and internal truths by reduction and induction. 2. Art or technical skills, which is a logical capability to make. 3. Practical knowledge, which is a logical capacity to secure the good life, and includes the political art. 4. Intuition, which captures the first concepts or unarticulated realities from which clinical knowledge is obtained. And 5. Philosophic knowledge, which is scientific knowledge combined with intuition of the things that are greatest by nature. What is fascinating in Aristotle's schema is that clinical knowledge, and reason more broadly, isn't independent of intuition. Rather, it is intuition that makes clinical knowledge possible. Centuries later, Locke made a similar point in contrasting intuition and presentation. Presentation needs conscious steps, but each step is or should be instinctual. At least, intuition underpins the thinking process, since fundamental axioms and primary guidelines of reasoning can't be developed by any other means. And, naturally, the exact same is also true of our essential moral beliefs, of useful knowledge. Today, there's a top in Antarctica that has been unnamed Intuition Peak, in honor of the role of intuition in the advancement of human knowledge. But one important caveat to climb down from this high point. If you put a conservative person in a room with a left-wing one, or a spiritual person with a non-religious one, you will quickly find that their intuitions conflict. Intuition can and should be used to create hypotheses, but never to validate claims. Chapter 3. The Two Faces of Intuition. The concept of intuition cuts at the really core of our uniqueness and could actually be the last arbiter of how each of us manifests who we actually are as living beings. In this respect, intuition represents the essence of our personal and collective identities and includes the trigger of life energy that we often refer to as spirit. Intuition as spirit is certainly not a new idea. On the contrary, it is deeply rooted in a range of philosophical traditions, both Eastern and Western. Rudolf Steiner, an Austrian-born scientific, literary, and philosophical scholar, asserted that free spiritual activity, which he generally understood as the human ability to think intuitively, is the proper cognitive course for human beings to take in order to show their full flexibility as people. To Steiner, by experiencing and living instinctive thinking, that is, the conscious experience of purely spiritual content, true freedom as an imaginative force for socially accountable action would end up being manifest. Intuition as both a source and a way of understanding is experienced through two faces: the face of the specialist and the face of the mystic. Intuition's expert face is the instantaneous voice of past experiences being offered on a particular challenge in the present. Intuition's professional face uses the practically unrestricted amount of information kept in human memory. Just because this process takes place underneath your threshold of awareness, it is not understood to your mindful mind. Intuition's professional face is the professional within us. Intuition's mystic face is the voice of your spirit or soul and your connection to the collective unconsciousness. The mystic face of intuition brings you in contact with the shared unconscious, or humankind's morphogenic field. This yields info that transcends our own personal experiences and memories. It enables us to read the unspoken and know the unknowable, commonly referred to as our sixth sense. In many aspects, this dimension of intuition refers to the metaphysical nature of living beings, and for that reason takes us even further away from the perceived comfort of structured rational thought. Simply because it extends beyond for many of the acceptable bounds of rationality, linking intuition with familiar principles like memory and personal experience, the mystic face of intuition depends as much, if not more, upon faith as it does reason. Accepting, if not totally understanding, this element of intuition is a sine qua non of manifesting our spiritual selves. The mystic face of intuition is the mystic within us. In both ways, intuition improves our knowledge and, importantly, gives and guides for making moral judgments in life and work. It is specifically important because it matches and enhances the dominant mode of getting knowledge over the past 400+ years: analytical thinking. Intuition adds value because it draws upon a source of knowledge and understanding, which analytical thinking isn't privy to. It extends our available supply of knowledge by going where reasoning alone cannot. Intuition takes us into the unseen, the unheard, and the non-physical worlds. This is the reason that some of the world's greatest researchers and artists recognize its value and honestly acknowledge its impact on them and their work. Distinguished American medical scientist Jonas Salk, for example, wrote that only by cultivating and fine-tuning the procedures of intuition and reason complementary can we attain the knowledge we seek. Intuition is also important because it runs in the subconscious, leaving your mindful mind free for other jobs and activities. Intuition is thus a resource that does not need any energy per se to obtain and use. It's up to us, individually and jointly, to open our hearts and minds to this valuable resource. The significance of intuition maybe has never been as great as it is today. In an environment that seems to be progressively chaotic and intricate, the pressures on people and organizations, to say nothing about communities, nation-states, and other forms of shared undertaking, to make smart and significant choices are increasing at a rate never, ever experienced previously. Dissatisfied with traditional thinking of ways to approach and criteria success in their personal lives and work, people in greater numbers seem to be interested more in their mission from meaning and knowledge about their inner truth than in concrete rewards usually related to progress along one's professional path and the extrinsic, fleeting nature typically related to the pursuit of happiness. Chapter 4. Comprehending Intuition and How the Mind Functions. Steve Jobs, in his popular Stanford University beginning address, 2005, advised students not to let the noise of others' opinions hush your own inner guide, but rather have the bravery to follow your heart and intuition. Only a few psychologists would deny that we have a subtle mind that can be a great source of strength, delight, and creative insight. Nevertheless, as mental scientists, our job is to comprehend how the subtle, intuitive mind works, and thus keep from any simple-minded romantic pronouncements. Perhaps by seeking to comprehend how our instincts can trick us, we can learn how to master our subtle, instinctive mind and cultivate greater strength, happiness, and creative and reflective capabilities. In their fascinating book, The Unnoticeable Gorilla and Other Ways That Our Intuition Deceives Us, Christopher Chabris and Daniel Simmons offer readers with unique insights to the illusions of the mind and how to master them. This book is wonderfully doubtful and scientifically knowledgeable, but also colored by anecdotes and wit in relation to the subtle ways in which our instinctive mind can deceive us. Noticeably, it has become fashionable to reason that intuitive approaches of thinking and deciding transfer to analytical methods. This is a seductive argument, given that intuition is often assumed to be faster and easier than rational consideration. Early humanistic accounts of human development also promoted the idea that intuition plays a main role in positive psychological health. According to Rogers, to end up being a fully functioning individual required developing the capability to trust your impulses and cultivate intuitive, spontaneous models of self-expression. Likewise, Jung defined optimal psychological health as consisting of the capability to maintain an openness to messages from a deeper level of the unconscious. However, right there are threats in following instincts based upon the idea that they simply feel right, particularly if we follow intuitions in the absence of comprehending how the mind works. The motivation for The Unnoticeable Gorilla originated from one simple experiment carried out by its authors, involving a gorilla beating its chest on a basketball court. The authors asked participants to watch a video in which a group of basketball players dressed either in white or black passed several of the basketballs around. Individuals were asked to count the number of times the players in white passed the ball. At the time of the video, a person dressed in a black gorilla suit walked into the middle of the group of players and beat their chest. Later on, students were asked if they had seen anything uncommon or a gorilla. Surprisingly, half of the individuals didn't report seeing a gorilla. The study rapidly turned into one of the most well-known experiments in psychology. The invisible gorilla idea, from which the title of the book originates, can be applied to many situations, which includes case studies where people looking directly at a violent criminal offense being carried out later report not seeing it, and cases of unseen symptoms and signs by expert medical staff being involved in an intuitive health diagnosis. But farther still, the undetectable gorilla study sparked an inquiry into the many other ways in which our intuition can deceive us. Chabris and Simmons define 6 daily impressions that are crucial in this context: the impression of attention, memory, confidence, knowledge, cause, and potential. Consider the illusion of confidence. In a courtroom consideration, a jury can easily come down with a puzzling a speaker's self-confidence with his or her credibility, with more positive speakers deemed more credible. This, naturally, has repercussions for the way jurors give weight to the proof provided by different witnesses. Even so, if we can learn how to cultivate and really appreciate modesty and unpredictability, similar to Socrates proclaimed, we may learn how to listen more thoroughly and sensibly without falling victim to the illusion of confidence. It appears to make instinctual sense that you should trust your physician more than they appear more confident when they're giving you health guidance. We might intuitively lose self-confidence in doctors who have to consult with a recommendation book before advising us, though research has revealed that confidence isn't a good indication of capability. Chabris and Simmons suggest that it is sensible for us to enhance tentativeness and modesty as worthy attributes, or strengths of character, much like a positive psychology now advises, and hence welcome back the unsure to expression, "I'm uncertain." Likewise, by becoming conscious of the illusion of attention, the misconception that we pay close attention to more than is actually possible, we may stay away from foolish, dangerous behavior, like multitasking through driving. The problem with the illusion of attention is that it feels a bit like we're paying enough attention, for instance, when we're driving and, all at once, texting on the phone. Nonetheless, when our attention is split compared to the situation where our attention is focused on one job alone. Problem is that we often do not notice this efficiency deficit until all the unanticipated takes place, and it's far too late. As such, good judgment grounded in the knowledge of how the mind works needs to change our intuitive feeling that we are doing the right thing, making the right choice, in control of the situation, etc. Other impressions, such as the misconception that people have reservoirs of untapped brain power that is just waiting to be effortlessly accessed, reinforces laziness and our tendency to choose the many quick and easy repairs society peddles our way. An example could be this: the idea that listening to Mozart will make your kids smarter, or that the subliminal messaging can help you quit smoking. Might sound enticing until you find there's no proof that these things work. The issue isn't the absence of potential, but the impression that it is easy to unlock this potential. How many of us have been fooled into thinking that cognitive training products like Sudoku can help conquer the general negative effects on aging memory with just several minutes of training every day? Who would even think of questioning such an idea? After all, undoubtedly, there's some truth in the old adage, use it or lose it, right? Chabris and Simmons clarify, though, that while you could get even better at Sudoku, if you believe that Sudoku brain training will help you remember where you have put your secrets or keep your mind sharper in general, then you're not succumbing to the illusion of potential. The issue is that the effects of Sudoku practice might not generalize to other cognitive skills, each of which might really need to be cultivated in somewhat different ways. But it feels a little like Sudoku training is a much better form of brain training than something which could actually help our brains far more, but which might be harder work, such as regular aerobic exercise. While the many illusions of intuition could have serious effects at times, some of the repercussions are funny, and this amusing gratitude of our foibles may even help us to transcend the illusions. Chabris and Simmons tell the story of the Pope Tart, the comical situation where our overzealous pattern recognition leads us to see popes engraved into Pop-Tarts. Moreover, the Simpsons are said to offer us with lessons on the illusion of casualty. Regardless of Lisa's best shots, Homer fails, prone to believing that a rock has the capability to keep both tigers and bears away. Even though you may laugh out loud while reading these stories, Chabris and Simmons are fast to remind us that we ourselves could fall vulnerable to comparable impressions. Chabris and Simmons suggest that it is not the complete lack of instinctual decision-making that guarantees higher levels of adaptive functioning. Rather, They suggest that the key to effective choice-making is understanding when to trust your intuition and when to be wary of it and do the consistent effort of thinking things through. Chabris and Simmons ask us to slow down, unwind, and examine our assumptions before jumping to conclusions, therefore exercising modesty, vigilance, self-regulation, and perspective. They ask us to use our new understanding of how the mind works to understand why people act in the manner in which they do. That is often not because of stupidity, arrogance, or lack of focus, but because of the everyday impressions that affect all of us. As such, they hire us to work out objectivity, kindness, forgiveness, and social intelligence. It is all too easy to harshly judge others, but when we truly react to the call of Socrates to know thyself, and when we truly come to comprehend our subtle instinctive mind, we end up being more caring and understanding of others. Remarkably, the JAM study performed by Wilson and Schooler, 1991, represents one of the few attempts in the book to actually determine the type of situations in which intuition might actually be superior to intentional analysis. While logical analysis could be definitely needed in some circumstances, hiring a staff member based on his prior experience rather than on misleading show of self-confidence when deciding between the taste of two jams or two lovers, we might question how far rational analysis can be used. Till determined otherwise by the completely functioning person, these could be well considered matters of the heart, to the extent that no single right answer can be determined using logic or facts of science. Nonetheless, with its focus on the restriction of intuition, this book does inspire further inquiry into the other side of the dispute and suggests the need for greater grasp of the situations in which intuition, or perhaps heuristics, could prove to be superior to rationality. Nevertheless, this terrific book by Chabris and Simmons helps us move past mystical psychological attachments to the ideal of intuition. The book opens intuition to scientific inquiry in most amusing and engaging way. And though Steve Jobs advised that we need to have courage to trust our intuition, this book teaches us that we also really need to have courage to slow down, relax, and examine our assumptions. Then and only then do we give ourselves a very real chance of finding the invisible gorillas in our midst, something which may well need the development of new self-controls. Chapter 5. How to intuitively make smart choices. As a user-friendly therapist, I praise my high-octane instincts. I owe the true blessing of becoming a physician to one. Even so, at 20, when an undeviating inner voice told me I was going to health school, it was the last thing I thought I wanted. This gut-centered voice, committed to your joy, health, and survival, is, with practice, available to everybody. However, when you deviate even a nanofraction from your inner guide, energy subsides, whether a subtle seepage or radical bottoming out. The more ferociously faithful you are to this truth, the more energized you will be. Intuition offers a direct line to your vital force and also, as I experience it, to a divine intelligence. We can afford to stay deaf to intuition's messages. Its competence is energy. Its job is to know every nuance of what makes you tick. A master at reading vibes, intuition is constantly tallying what gives positive energy, what dissipates it. Who you meet, where you go, your job, your family, present events are all examined, vital data that you can learn to interpret and use. Here's a formula from my book, Positive Energy, to help you get going. First off, listen to your body. There are positive and negative instincts about relationships which highlight compatible matches. Second, act upon this info, which is often the hardest part. Let me walk you through the process. Recognize your body's intuitions about vibes. A people skill most of our parents or caretakers didn't know or teach us is intuitively reading vibes. We learned a lesson from surface information, how good somebody appears, looks, education, or if a circumstance adds up on paper. But intuition goes deeper. To make it work for you, other active ingredients must be considered, such as what positive vibes feel like. For example, a sense of heart, empathy, and nurturance. In contrast, negative people project prickly, draining vibes that put you on guard. Here is a general standard of body-based instincts. Be sure to use this list at a first meeting to fix problems if you're already included or to weigh opportunities. Also, feel free to contribute to it. Being a user-friendly, I know that a signature energy always accompanies circumstances or people. Remember the Lil Abner jinxed animation character who always had a black cloud hanging over his head? Not a vibe that bodes well for advantageous results. Instead, learn to gravitate toward brightness, a positive intuition your body's responses will verify. When turning into vibes, take several silent moments to go into picking up mode, not intellectual analysis. Try to find these signs to determine attraction. Positive instincts about relationships or situations. Some feeling of comfort, familiarity, or brightness. You might notice you've understood the individual previously, similar to the experience of déjà vu. You breathe simpler, chest and shoulders are relaxed, gut is calm. You find yourself leaning forward, not defensively crossing your arms or edging away to keep some distance. Your heart opens. You feel safe, serene, energized, expansive, or alive. You're at ease with a person's touch, whether a handshake, hug, or at the time of intimacy. Negative instincts about relationships or situations. An ill feeling in the pit of your stomach, or increased stomach acid, which may prompt an unpalatable déjà vu. Your skin begins crawling, you're tense, intuitively withdraw if touched. Shoulder muscles are in knots, chest or area throat constricts. You see aggravated aches or discomfort. The hair on the back of your neck creepily stands on end. A sense of malaise, darkness, pressure, agitation, or being drained. Intuition helps you act from instinct, not impulse. A look before you leap wisdom that points you to positive energy. When it comes to who you love, where you work, or any essential decision, the last thing you want is to be unclear. Tuning in keeps you particular. Practice the next exercise to get this down. When intuition, learn how to pin down and act on your vibes. Now, you're going to tune in, trust your body, and make choices based upon the vibes you sense. Tune in. Choose a relationship or situation that needs information about whether or not to move forward. Perhaps a relationship, trip, or move. Start with a much easier target before you handle higher stakes. Run it by this section's criteria for positive and negative intuitions, or others you find dependable. It's handy to make a leading 5 list of the most killer signs of positive attraction. For one of my clients, it includes feeling stimulated and safe. Another must register an increased aliveness and peaceful sense. Write your top 5 in a diary so they do not get hazy. See how they build up here. Act upon vibes. This is where we must be warriors. I know personally and from clients how much easier it is to tune into than to act on vibes. Insecurity, ego, lust, stubbornness can obscure better judgment. At times, it takes catching them to all recognize that you won't tolerate such damaging again. However, if you do not take such a bumpy path, try these choices. If the vibes feel overall positive, go for it. Check out the possibilities. If the vibes are combined or you're unsure, take a pass or at least wait. If there's just negative, have the bravery to walk away, no matter how tempting the option seems. Then observe how listening to energy in this way leads you to the juiciest chances. Now, I want you to start listening. Really listening. I guarantee you will be making smarter choices. Why is this the case? You'll be running from an area inside that's juicy, core felt, authentic, not from impulse, to adhere or disown your strength. You will not be seduced by what might look good, but betrays your gut. Intuition is a reality detector. Chapter 6. The connection between intuition and proficiency. In some cases, you stumble upon a short article so misdirected that despite all the essential work accumulating on your desk, you just need to react. That is what happened to me a few days ago. A peaceful Sunday night, I was reading the first Sunday New York Times of the new year, January 5th, 2020. And there it was, business section with a viewpoint piece by Robert Schiller. Trust your gut, use your head. Ordinarily, I would just carry on to more useful articles, but not yesterday. The piece was published in the Sunday Times, and the writer is a 2013 Nobel laureate, an economics professor at Yale, and a best-selling author. He has been listed as one of the 100 most prominent financial experts of the world for the past decade, and has many more honors and qualifications than I can list here. Schiller really deserves to be taken seriously. Schiller opens his essay with his concern that the stock exchange is overvalued, and I, a non-economist, suspect he could be right. After all, the stock exchange moves in cycles, as we all know, but Schiller speaks with more than that. The offender that has outraged him is that people are relying on gut feelings and intuition instead of competence, especially his proficiency. And that's his real topic, that respect for knowledge is decreasing and respect for intuition is increasing. So this essay of his is a things are going to hell diatribe. What's his proof? Exhibit A, recommendations that the scientific approach in newspapers is lower now than in the 1940s. Truly, that is his evidence? Exhibit B is this. The phrases gut feeling, visceral feeling, and trust your gut are increasing in the media. Exhibit C is then a cherry-picked trying books that proclaim gut feelings. One is by Jack Welch, the CEO of GE from 1981 to 2001. Another is Walter, Isaac's son biography of Steve Jobs. An argument could be made that Jack Welch, with his wealth of experience, did have a good deal of proficiency. The same argument may encompass Steve Jobs, who pioneered the iPhone without any clinical marketing research to back it up. Regardless of one's emotions about Welch and Jobs, citing books like these does not make up a clinical argument. Now, I happen to agree with Schiller about a diminished respect for competence and have written things about this pattern, which my coworkers and I call a war on competence. Schiller, sadly, tangles up proficiency with the scientific technique and other subjects, creating confusion rather than clarity. Schiller appears to believe that true professionals are scientific scientists instead of skilled decision-makers, although I take a contrary view. I see experts as highly knowledgeable professionals who see things others do not, and regularly make better decisions than the rest of us. I have identified 7 criteria for determining experts. For somebody with a reputation for scientistship, Schiller appears content to communicate his impressions and prejudices with no pretense of researchship. He disregards contrary evidence, like the influence of heuristics and biases, community, which installs its own unique criticism of intuition. He has chosen to write a polemic. Still, the real problem I have with his essay is that he says that intuition and competence are revers, that depending on intuition means turning down expertise. I think Schiller has gotten it backwards. My own view is just the reverse. Notified intuition is the basis for expertise. Taking a look at the positive side, Schiller's essay provides a chance to clarify the relationship between intuition and know-how. Kahneman and Klein defined some of the conditions under which knowledge can develop and can be expressed as notified intuitions. The intuition of firemen, for example, and perhaps the intuitions of Jack Welch and Steve Jobs. I did a believed experiment and thought of a Schiller clone depending on pure analysis, separated from experience running GE for 20 years, or running Apple during its amazing period of innovation. I am not with confidence seeing a performance history of success. From my perspective, notified instincts originate from knowledge. The two are closely associated, not reveres. Knowledge shows tactic knowledge, not the proficiency of treatments or the buildup of scholastic honors. I'm not criticizing Schiller's academic accomplishments as an economic expert. Rather, I'm questioning his credibility in subjects he has not scientifically checked out. He has no background that I can find in the areas of intuition or know-how. The paradox of Schiller's essay is that he is guilty of the sin that he is grumbling about. People without confidence promoting their own viewpoints that stem mostly from their uninformed gut feelings. This has been Intuition, the Development and Psychology of Intuitive Senses. Written by Celestia Copps. Read for you by Chloe Jacobson. Copyright 2020 by Celestia Copps. Production copyright by Celestia Copps.